So I'm starting the recording. Hello and welcome to the A Conversation with podcast. I am Ramsey Tabor. I'm a senior at the Mount, and today I am with Miss Beren.
Hi, everyone.
So, Miss Beren, would you just like to, I assume people know you, but for anyone who doesn't, who are you? What do you do?
I am the Dean of Student Life and Formation at Mount St. Joseph Academy.
Awesome. So, my first question for you is when you were young, like small child, there's always the question like, oh, what did you want to be? What was your plan?
Like, how young?
Like, early, like maybe like 5, 6, like young.
Oh, 5, 6. I definitely want to be like a member of the all-women's professional baseball league that ended in 1948, but that's okay.
Oh.
No, probably younger. Like, yeah, I always liked being a teacher, but then I really honestly liked being politics or being a politician of some sort.
So actually, that leads me perfectly to my next question, which is why you chose to teach social studies.
That's exactly why. Going into college, my path was at first going to be law or, like, in essence, be a constitutional lawyer. But then I was kind of teetering back and forth. I really liked politics. I really liked government. I wanted to do something in government, but then I really liked teaching, and I loved my history courses. So eventually I flipped the coin and took the route of teaching history.
Of your history courses you took, what was like your favorite topic or thing to learn about?
My favorite topic, and really what my specialty is in, is American colonial history. So again, awesome. Declaration of Independence, Constitution,
the good stuff.
The structure of government, like all that fun stuff.
And then, so from there, how did you end up working at Mount?
So, actually by chance, because I was teaching at another school in the city, a Catholic school in the city, and I was the dean of students there. And the day that they were doing some restructuring and reorganizing, and they had asked me to be principal, and I really didn't know if I wanted to do that. And a friend of mine who I taught with actually was teaching at Mount, and she had called me very randomly, very out of the blue, and was like, I know you love your job and you love what you're doing, but I'm just letting you know that there's a history position open at Mount, and it's for AP Government and Politics. And it was literally the same day where I was like, I don't want to be principal. I don't know what I want to do. And,
that's amazing.
Yeah, it was very much Holy Spirit intervened. And she was like, well, throw your hat in the ring and see what happens.
That's one of the coolest teaching stories I think I've ever heard. Yeah. Just like, it's perfect timing.
And actually they offered me both schools offered me a job the same day. Like within an hour of each other. I was offered principal of another school and the teaching position here at Mount. And and I talked to my aunt very in-depthly because she was a sister of Notre Dame, and she was just very wise and insightful, and I sat and chatted with her for literally about 2.5 hours of what do I do and pros and cons and all that. And
good pros and cons list.
Good pros and cons list. And we came up, actually she gave me the best advice I'll ever take away. She basically said, flip a coin. And I was a little angry. I was like, wait, what? Like, flip a coin?
Yeah.
And she said, right, because when it's in the air, you're going to know what side you want it to land on.
Yeah, you always hope. You're like, oh, I want it to be the side. And it's like, you don't actually, it's not actually even.
Exactly. And that's what she said. Now you know what you want to do.
That's really good advice, especially for, people my age, because we're looking at colleges. And so I was like, well, it's the equal. It's like, is it actually?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, take a minute and honestly flip a coin, because when you throw it in the air, you're going to be like, ooh, I want it on heads or I want it on tails. And that really does help make, even though it's a simple way to make a decision, but it really did help me say, I want to go back in the classroom.
I love that. And so this could be at Mount, or this could be you taught at a previous school as well, but what is like, that you can tell, what is one of your favorite like teaching stories that you have?
Oh, favorite teaching story. I have have a lot of funny stories. And then sometimes I tell them and I forget that I'm in mixed company.
As I said, the ones you can share.
The ones I can share. One of my favorites is when I was teaching. I've taught AP Government and Politics now for 21 years, legitimately. And I started teaching it in 2003. And so one of my first classes, I'm teaching about the 10 Amendments and the right to bear arms. And, I throw it out to the class and, the right to bear arms, what is it essentially? What does that mean? What was the purpose behind it?
Oh, no.
Okay? Like, what do we think? Like, what was the real meaning behind why they thought this was so important to make it the Second Amendment?
I could see how this could go wrong easily.
And one of my students raises her hand and basically says, well, it's giving women the choice. And I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Go on.
And she's like, she's like, well, you know, we should have the right too, to, you know, to choose what we want and how we want to wear it. I'm like, I was like, all right, you definitely have to explain a little bit more. And she's like, you know, like tank tops or tube tops, and we should have the right to bare our arms whenever we want. And
I mean, it's a valid point.
I took a minute. I looked at her, and her best friend sat across from her, and she was like, oh, she's serious. And then the whole class just erupts, and she's like, what? You guys, what? And we're like, you know, I explained to her that the right to bear arms actually means that you're allowed to have a gun, allowed to own a firearm. And she's like, no. And I still tease her, and even when I taught government politics, when I always tell this story, because she became a lawyer. Like, so she is
I hope she knows what it is now.
She does. She's currently a lawyer. She's doing great, and I still email her when I taught this course. I would email her every year and been like, told the Holly story, and she's like, I can't believe you're still telling that story.
Well, if you're listening, you're still famous here now.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's I don't know what I expected in stories, but that's definitely amazing.
Definitely one of my favorites.
So, moving from teaching, you recently have taken up the job of Dean of Student Life. So, how did that choice come about?
They didn't really give me a choice. No.
Cut that from the record.
Yeah. That's just, I was basically like, you have to know.
We are joking for the record.
Kidding, 100%. Yeah. No, again, it's kind of fell into my lap again. It's one of those things where
the Holy Spirit kind of just passed it down.
It was kind of like, you've done it before, you can do it again. There was a need, and you know, I really love the Mount. I love being here. I really love what the Sisters of St. Joseph teach in terms of being ready for any good work, and to, you know, put your talents forth. And going back to, again, my aunt, who was a sister of Notre Dame, and one of the things she always said, one of her mottos was all that God basically calls us, that all that's good in me I give to you. And it's something that very much has stuck with me, that if I have talents that I can give and help in a different position, why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah.
So even though I very, very much miss my classroom, and especially in an election year teaching that politics
that would definitely this would be a fun year for it.
Yeah, I really miss it.
Maybe you can just like invade some of the classrooms and be like, it is my lesson. I remember you came in my classroom last year.
I do it all the time. I will if I hear anyone talking government or politics, I'm like, hey, what you talking about? What's going on over here?
You're like across the building, you're like, I heard something. You're like, you have a secret hearing, like superpower.
Exactly. That's what I always said.
Politics?
Two of the jobs I would always have wanted would be, one, chief of staff, because you basically rule the world, and vice president, because you have to do nothing and it still looks good, and get to ride on Air Force too.
Like,
so
the president's not the greatest job. There's better ones.
It's a terrible job. You definitely want the vice president.
So this is, I think you might have already covered this, but like, what is your favorite part of being the student of student life?
My favorite part is literally getting to interact with everybody on a daily basis, because when I taught history, like, I really only taught juniors and seniors for my entire time, and I didn't get to meet the youngers, like the freshmen and sophomores, and there were some kids that I never even got to meet. So now I get to really meet and interact with everyone, which is really nice.
I got to briefly meet you when I was a sophomore, because you came in and taught us about the SSJ in my Honor Zero class. But like, there was a group of us that just happened to be there, but typically sophomores don't take that. So like, you didn't really get to interact except for chances. So that's, and I know you took over the Laced Legacy briefly, and you had that for a little bit. So you still got to teach with
that. Mrs. Escobar and I were lucky enough we actually got to go to Le Puy and take a class there.
I think I remember you saying that. That's amazing.
And so that was the whole point, was, and other of our affiliate schools were doing this for the whole point of having a deeper experience and a deeper knowledge of the history of the Sisters of St. Joseph. And so Mrs. Escobar and I came back and wrote the curriculum, and you know, it's still, thankfully, it's still in place. I just unfortunately don't have as much free time as I used to.
I went to a Sisters of St. Joseph grade school, so I forgot when I came here that most people didn't, because they'd be like, yeah, the sisters from France, and they're like, huh? And they're like, you don't know about Le Puy?
Everyone should know about Le Puy. It's a lovely little town.
Yeah, I want to visit. It seems really lovely.
Absolutely, I would 100% encourage that.
Can we do a school trip?
I'm trying my best.
Talk to me about that. So moving kind of in your time as dean, you've kind of created a famous phrase recently, which is, a moment of silence is good for the soul. How did you come up with that, and when, and why do you think it's so important to kind of consistently remind us of that?
So it's, again, going back to my favorite person on this earth, who's my aunt. something she said often. And I've realized as I'm getting older, so many of the things she said to me as a kid and a young adult and, a 20 and 30 something year old are very much sticking with me. And I find myself repeating them often. What she used to basically say, like, when life gets overwhelming, a moment of quiet is good for the soul. Like, so just sit and take a couple minutes, just sit, whether it be in chapel, whether it be at lunch, whether it be to start your morning. She always said a moment of quiet. Like, you just need to settle yourself. You need to sit, to calm your soul, to calm your thoughts, to remember what your purpose of the day is and how to kind of recenter yourself. And that, like, it's I say it often, even within my family life, my friends, like, sometimes I'm just like, I just give me a second. I just need a moment of quiet. Like, and that helps me to kind of refocus myself. So
I love
it works for me. So I share it with you guys.
I think that's great. Okay. So I have one definitely serious question for you. We have some allegations and evidence proof of you removing a certain tree from a certain
what
bathroom.
You're talking about. Nope.
No
idea.
No clue? Okay, no comment on that?
Plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability. Okay, I mean, there's sources to say otherwise, but okay. Moving on.
See these sources. I don't know. I have no recollection of your account.
All right, moving on. So we have one game for you before we finish up, so as you were the head of the history department for many years, and sadly we don't have a lot of those teachers anymore. They've moved on to other parts of their life. However, we have three who very generously sent me some odd fun facts about themselves, which you're going to have to tell me which one it is.
Okay.
So I'm going to read you a fun fact, and you're going to have to tell me whether this was Miss Schools, Miss Steinmetz, or Mr. Nardini.
Okay.
This is about. Okay. So we have a few. So our first one will say is, this teacher always says, "Oh, that's a sin," when someone tells them a sad story.
That's Mrs. Schools.
There we go. This teacher once scored 4 touchdowns in a single game.
Ooh. See, I feel like it's a trick question because you want to say Mr. Nardini, but I know he played lacrosse. But Miss Steinmetz played flag football for a little bit. So I'm going with Miss Steinmetz. Oh, it's Nardini?
It's Nardini.
Man, I'm going to get up.
I don't even know the story. They just sent me. I sent them in mass email like a few weeks ago. I was like, "Hey, can you please send me some things?"
I'm going to be in trouble for that one. He played lacrosse in high school, though. I don't know about that one.
Does he play rugby or something?
Oh, he played rugby.
I think he did.
He did in college.
Yeah, that's definitely what that's.
All right. I should have known that.
Okay. This person's mother has a tremendous number of religious articles around her house.
This is Schools.
There you go. This teacher does not have a middle name.
Miss Steinmetz.
There you go. This teacher had an aunt who was an SSJ that passed away in 1996 and is buried out by the villa.
Miss Schools.
This teacher once had security officials at an airport check their luggage for explosives.
Mr. Nardini.
There we go. This teacher has traveled to Gambia.
Miss Steinmetz.
There we go. And this teacher was a political science major in college.
Ooh. That. Oh, who did that?
It's a great one to end on.
This is a good one to end on because now I'm trying to remember. I know it's not Miss Schools. I'm going to go with Miss Steinmetz, but I think I'm wrong.
It was, in fact, Miss Schools. So,
because I was like, that's too obvious.
So, except for 2, which were the obvious ones that you said were too obvious, and you didn't want to do.
Tricking me.
You officially do know your
I know my department.
So
I do.
You will not be ashamed seeing them later. So, to finish out our interview, I know we just had some fun. I have one last kind of genuinely actually serious question, which is, what is one piece of advice you would give your younger self who was our age now?
Ooh. One piece of advice I'd give to myself when I was 18.
Our age, yeah, or like 16 to 18.
I would say follow your gut because it was almost always right. And you don't have to be so concerned with what everybody else thinks.
I think that's really good advice.
That'd be definitely the 2 things I would love. It took me too long to figure that out.
Yeah.
So
I feel like a lot of us know that, but you don't listen to it.
You know it, but you don't put it into practice.
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest part. Like it's basically like, I know this, like I have that gut feeling. I know that this is what I should do. And you listen to too many voices. So kind of coincides with, sometimes you need that quiet for a minute to figure out what you are actually wanting, needing, listen, take the minute to listen to God, like, and to kind of block all that other noise out, to be like, no, this is what I think is right. And stand, and actually, if you know you're in the right, or if you in your heart believe it, stand by it.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.
No problem at all.
Thank you for listening to an interview with. I've been Ramsey Tabor, and I hope you come join us again for our next episode, which will be with Mr. Schmauk.
Nice.